Thank you so much for joining today. We're going to do a really great session going in depth on how to set up event tracking properly for your beehiiv newsletters. This will lead to much greater visibility, more insight into how you're growing, who's signing up for your newsletter, and at the end of the day, if you're running ads, more effective ad campaigns, ones that are optimized conversions, minimal number of false positives, maximal matching within the different ad platforms. From that, it's going to be a really valuable session today. I recommend that as we get started, you have your beehiiv platform pulled up, your dashboard. Also, this is going to be a workshop style webinar today, so we're going to be doing things kind of step by step. It's not going to be me just like talking to you from slides. We're going to be going through step by step and really going through and setting up the tracking that is so valuable. If you also want to drop in like what ad platforms and what analytics tools you're interested in learning about today, we're going to by default be covering Google Analytics and Meta. That's what I have planned. But for the time that we have, I'm happy to cover kind of anything else. The principles are all the same. The process is exactly the same for virtually every ad platform, but the particulars, like what shows up on the screen on the different ad platforms, can be a little bit different. So happy to show the specifics if anybody has interest. So the main ones would be there's Meta, which covers Facebook and Instagram. There's Google Analytics, which covers Google Ads, whether you're doing display, YouTube, or search. There's X for people who are on X still. There is a whole world of like very niche ones. You have, we're not going to, I can tell you now, I'm not going to cover like Snapchat, Pinterest, Quora. If anybody remembers Quora, they all have their own pixels. X is one, and I had another one in mind, and it's escaping me now. Oh, LinkedIn would be the other one, the other main ones. Meta and GA4, Google really cover most of the use cases. You can technically do a separate setup for Google Ads, but the one that we'll cover today will be sufficient. Don't want to make things too overcomplicated, and obviously want to operate in the best practices of where things are going, which is just to set up everything through GA4. With that being said, I think we're ready to jump in. We got a bunch of people here, and we will get started. Thank you again for joining today. This session will be recorded. We'll be recording the screen share and sharing any resources that I mention on the call today within the recording. Give us a couple days to get that up and live. Producer Tony here is in the room behind the scenes. You can't see him, you can't hear him, but he's here. I will talk to him from time to time. I'll try to remember to kind of preface any answers that I give by repeating the question or the comment that he provides me. But he's the one that's going to be interacting in the chat, and we'll be able to help you out. Tony, if you wouldn't mind, could you drop the link to where we post the other webinars in case there's anything that I reference and folks want to check out our past virtual events? That would be much appreciated. Cool. With that said, I'm going to get started. I'm going to share my screen, and we'll do a quick overview of kind of what we're actually here to do today, followed by an actual intensive on how to literally implement the event tracking that you guys all came here to do. So what you're seeing is one of my publications built on beehiiv. It should look very familiar. If not the content, you kind of the look and feel. For now, we're launching our new web builder very, very soon. So soon, every beehiiv website will be as customized as you want it to be. For now, this is the one that I have. So typical workflow is that you have a user come in and they want to subscribe, put their email in, hit the subscribe button, and then they're added to your list. Now you can see, of course, those users, once they come into your platform, you can see a lot of their details within the dashboard underneath their subscriber record. Give this a second to load. Internet's always a little bit slower when I'm presenting these, but we do this. So when a user comes into your site, they subscribe, this is going to be the view that gets created for them. Underneath the acquisition details, you can see where they came in from. So in this case, I'm actually not in my normal one. We're going to go here, audience, subscribers. There we go. Defaulted to one of our other test publications. But you can see basically where users came from. In this case, channel means they came in through the website. Source corresponds to the UTM source. Tony, if you could drop a link on UTM parameters, that'd be helpful. But basically, UTM parameters are ways you can tag links that you share with either ad platforms or any link that you're sharing across the web that allows the analytics to show you where that user came from. So when it says direct, that just means the user typed in the website and came directly to your site. And it's also the default if there are no UTM parameters in the URL. Device type desktop, so I came on my computer, not my phone, and this is the URL at which I subscribed. And so just a little bit of basics around how we can find acquisition details, super useful for understanding on the user level how they discovered you. And then there's a couple other ways that we can aggregate that within our 3D analytics tools, as well as on the dashboards to really see that data at a macro level. So within beehiiv, you're going to have that tracking information. As long as you add UTM parameters, you will be able to see where users come from within beehiiv. What we're going to be focusing on today is how you let other platforms know about performance on how users discovered your website. So in this case, if I go to Google Analytics, pop in here, and I go down to, I believe I have this set up. Do I not? Oh, this will be fun. We can set this up in real time. I may also just not be in the right account. I think I'm just not in the right account. I was not in the right account. There we go. So in this case, we can see this is the number of active users over the preceding 7 days, the number of events that they've triggered, number of new users, number of key events. So Google Analytics is a great way to really go much more in depth on the on-site tracking portion. beehiiv in itself, we do have information and tracking around the events and stuff that happen on the web portion of your site. However, we haven't invested deeply in recreating these types of analytics just because Google Analytics does it so well. It's the industry standard. There's some like competitors like Fathom and Plausible that also have jumped into the space with similar value propositions. But our whole reasoning is that if this free tool does it so well, we could either spend a ton of time and money to try to compete with one of the most common pieces of technology in the entire globe, or we could just leverage that for our users. And so if you don't have Google Analytics set up, we will cover how to add the script to your site for the basic tracking. And then we'll also come in and we'll look at how we actually come in here and track specific events. And in this case, the sign up event to track specific subscribers to the newsletter. The other thing that we'll be jumping into is how we go into how we apply these principles to track data through Facebook. And so in this case, Meta, Facebook, whatever you want to call it, has the ability to not just deploy tracking for ads, but you can also see the activity that users took on the site over time. This typically is going to be used to feed into the tracking. Their general analytics is not necessarily something that we spend a lot of time focusing on, but when you're able to track these events, you can pass them and add them to your ad platform so that when you set up an ad campaign, you can say, okay, when you run this ad, I want the ads to optimize for a specific event. In this case, the subscribe event. Without this, what you're going to be doing is just tracking very basic like page views, which aren't particularly valuable. The thing to remember with Facebook is that it's very good at doing what you tell it to do. And so if you tell it to just get you visits and site page views, it's going to get you tons of them and it's going to be very, very cheap. The issue is that the people who are willing to click on an ad to take you to a page and just do a page view are not the same people who are willing to actually subscribe to your newsletter. And so the part around optimizing to the event that you actually want to drive is incredibly important. It's probably the most important part about all of these things. These ad platforms run on data. Obviously, your creative's important. Obviously, your audience targeting is important. But the third part of that, which is as equal, if not slightly more important, is what you're telling the platform to optimize for. There's so many people out there. These platforms are very, very sophisticated. And so if you tell it to get page views, it's going to get you a ton of page views very cheaply. Those page views aren't going to necessarily mean that you're getting people who are going to subscribe. Similarly, if you tell it to subscribe, you may get more, it may be a little bit more expensive. Obviously, you want to target around $1 to $2 for each of those conversions, but you can bet that you're actually going to get traffic that's going to subscribe. I didn't see too many requests for other platforms. If there are requests for other platforms, in terms of like the specifics, we can get into those, but I'm going to really focus on Google Analytics and Meta first, and then I'm going to move on to anything that gets dropped in the chat. So the first step for any of these tools is to basically understand what we're going to be doing within the platform. So in beehiiv, the first step for either of these things is to basically go into your website settings under Website Builder and go to your settings. And under pixels, we have this space where you can drop your different tracking pixels. So Google Tag Manager, the three that we're going to work with today are Google Tag Manager, Google Analytics, and Meta. And so I actually have a slightly different setup. I will move that over here so that we can all be working from the same thing. But basically, what we're going to be doing is, ID, cool. You can just follow along. If you go into business.facebook.com, you have your page and everything set up through this. You have to create the account set up and whatnot. When you create your pixel, you'll have this item here. It's under the data sources. So if we go to business.facebook.com, you'll have this interface. If you go to Events Manager, you can see the pixels you have. You can create one if you need one. But this ID is what we're looking for, and it's shown right here under the term data set. So if you click it, it'll copy it to your clipboard, and you're just going to take that over to your beehiiv account, and you're going to paste that where it says Metapixel. So now you have Meta tracking or Facebook tracking on the web portion of your site. One caveat being that because JavaScript isn't deployed through, you're not going to have the tracking show up in the emails themselves. It just doesn't work in email. It's not a beehiiv limitation. That's just a limitation of the media of email itself. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to go over here into Google Analytics. You're going to sign up at analytics.google.com. Under settings, we're going to go to data streams, and then we're going to click a data stream. If you need to create one, you'll do add stream. And then the instructions, the on-screen instructions are pretty straightforward. But once you've created the property to hold your analytics, you'll grab this measurement ID right here. And we're going to pop back to beehiiv, and under GA4, we will pop it right there. I want to pause for a second to answer any questions. That can be, I can gloss over like the creation of the account step for both of these, but again, it is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to go to analytics.google.com. You're going to follow those on-screen instructions to create an account. If you don't already have one, it's going to give you directions on like how to name stuff. I typically, for the property name, this is going to be the account name. I create a new account for each property. So Vacation Voyeur is the name of the publication. And then I've also named the data stream right here. I've also named this Vacation Voyeur. A stream URL is just going to be the URL of your publication. And you're more or less set up for success at this point. So grab that measurement idea. The third thing we're going to do is set up Google Tag Manager, which is going to be at tagmanager.google.com. This gives us a little bit more flexibility with how we can deploy our tracking and scripts. And from here, we're going to go to, we're going to create a container or create an account, which is going to be called whatever the name of your publication is. And then you're going to create a container, which is part of that process. And I just name that the name of the actual website. So once we have that created, it's going to walk you through those step-by-step screens in order to create the account. We're going to have this code here, this GTM dash, and then a string of numbers and letters. We're going to copy that over, and we're going to paste that right here. Before I move forward, I want to pause to let people catch up in case you're doing this at home. I also want to take a pause to answer any questions that may be dropped in the chat. Typically, we do a process where we'll have like a Q&A at the end, but I think with something like this, it could be really helpful to answer any questions. Tony flagged, I might want to talk about why somebody might want to use Google Tag Manager to deploy the tracking scripts over hard coding them or putting them directly into the beehiiv platform. This is a little bit more of a sophisticated move that in some ways just makes it easier to manage in one place. I prefer working, I'm very familiar with Google Tag Manager, and I just prefer working in there at once. What Google Tag Manager is fundamentally is think of it as like a box that sits on top of your website, and you can put whatever you want into that box. And when your site loads, anything in that box is going to be deployed into your site. And so we've built the platform so that like we have these scripts that are built into the website. So if you just add your ID, it's going to deploy the scripts like normal. But if you don't add them, you can also put them into Google Tag Manager if you just want to do all of your work in Google Tag Manager itself. I prefer working like that, but that's because I'm much more familiar with the technology. Given that we are working in Google Tag Manager today, it's totally fine to just do that through Google Tag Manager. But for simplicity, presumably a lot of folks here are getting very started with these tactics. I think that just dropping the pixels into the beehiiv platform is probably the easier part. Cool. So questions, plans to add Blue Sky, Pinterest, Reddit pixel IDs. I'm not familiar with Blue Sky having a pixel. They might. They're so new. I haven't really investigated them. Pinterest and Reddit, we don't have plans to. We could. They're just typically a little bit more niche. We don't really see the customer requests for those. That is to say, though, that any pixel that from any tool that you have absolutely is compatible with beehiiv. You would just deploy it through Google Tag Manager. So just because we're not offering those as like hard-codable options, you can certainly deploy any of those scripts through Google Tag Manager. And I guess with that question, I will do a quick run through of how you can deploy just a typical script through Google Tag Manager outside of kind of some of the event tracking that we're doing. Another question from Adesh. As email service providers are trying to keep their customers' data safe, knowing that our customers are interacting with emails will be difficult and the data analytics receiving should be taken with how much confidence. So these are kind of two separate issues. The performance of emails and the email service providers preserving privacy has very little to do with the actual web tracking that we're doing today because they're totally separate. ESPs have no control over whether somebody clicks on your site and views your site. There are some considerations when we're talking about users who are on the web using ad blockers, and if you're on iOS and you have their privacy protection, those platforms, specifically privacy protection, still allows for first-party cookies and for UTM parameters. It doesn't strip those. If you're using something like a uBlock or a Ghostery or one of those kind of ad blocking tools, those typically do block more. And so in that way, you may be, the result is somewhat missing data. So you may see the subscriber in beehiiv, but you may not see that subscriber come through as that conversion in Facebook. And actually, we're going to get into how these platforms have adapted to give you the cleanest data while preserving privacy. There are ways to ensure that you get as close, but the kind of bottom line is that it's a great question. It's a great question because it's very important to know that like what you're going to see in Facebook in your beehiiv account is your source of truth. Obviously, if somebody doesn't sign up, you're not going to see them in beehiiv. And if they do sign up, you're going to see them in beehiiv. So when you're totaling the number of signups that you get, your beehiiv account is your source of truth in terms of that total. Now, based on whatever ad tracking blocking tools that a subscriber might have, that may not show up in the ad platform analytics. And so it's very, very common, extraordinary, like literally given certainty almost these days that you will see more. If you are only running Facebook ads, you will see more signups in Facebook than what Facebook tracks as conversions. And that's not a beehiiv limitation. That's just the nature of how these tools work. Facebook will never be able to match 100% with 100% clarity, one-to-one those. But what we try to aim for is 80 to 90% coverage is really good. We also, without some of the more advanced things, you can usually get to like 50, 60, 70%. And so you can understand from like that, those disparities, kind of the advanced tracking methods that we'll show today, how they can really get you that extra step. And what I'm talking about is that smaller number, the 50, 60, 70%, that's with just the basic ad tracking of firing an event when somebody subscribes. We're also going to go through and show you how you can very easily set up what's called advanced matching to pass back some information to the ad platform so that they can do their own matching and basically figure out, okay, this user who I know their email, they clicked the ad, and then like 10 minutes later, we got an event that showed that they signed up. Even though we didn't register it through the pixel, we know that they signed up because we're getting this data back. I know that I'm speaking from a place where I've worked with these pixels for probably close to 10 years now. If there's anything that's like unclear about what I just said in terms of technical jargon, I sometimes have a hard time like catching myself and like explaining things more as a layman. So if there's anything that I just said, please drop in the chat. I'm happy to define definitions of anything that I've said. Fundamentally, once we've deployed these pixels, what's going to happen is that when your site loads, the website is going to load in little snippets of JavaScript, which is just it's a snippet of code that is going to monitor your site and look for specific events. So it's going to load in on your site and it's going to be just sitting there listening. And when users take specific events like viewing a page, or in our case, subscribing to the newsletter, we're setting up events that are then going to ping those pixels to say, hey, something happened. And what happened is either that page view or that subscription. And that's what we're going to cover today. You can make it anything you want. It's very flexible, but for today's conversation, we're going to say, this is how you ping those pixels to say something happened. And that's the process of tracking. So we have now these pixel IDs loaded into our beehiiv interface. Again, we're doing Meta, Google, and Google Tag Manager. The other one that I was missing earlier was TikTok. It was obviously very, very popular. Process is going to be identical to what we're covering today. And we also have documentation if that's something that is you want, like kind of the screen by screen view. So now we have all this. We have where you're sitting now with these implemented is that if you go into Events Manager, you'll start to see these charts fill out with some data. And so you'll be able to see page views. I have some other events. These can be ignored for the time being, but you'll start to see page views, and you will not yet begin to see subscribes. That comes in a minute, but you'll start to see these page views. There's little bit of a delay. So if you might want to wait like an hour or maybe two before you start seeing this data come in. But if you follow the steps to this point, you will start seeing the data come through like that. In Google Analytics, for example, you will also see data start coming through. It'll take a little bit longer with GA4. One of the things that I hate about GA4 is that there's a delay in the data in terms of when you see it. And so it typically takes about 48 hours for you to start seeing those page views come through. However, if you click on this under the report snapshot, if you look at the real-time overview, you'll be able to see stuff happening in real time. So this is how you will know that your pixel is firing. This literally happens if I go to the website and view this other page. What we should see here, this is me as the user that it is tracking. But if one of you guys goes to the site, vacationvoyeur.com, we'll start to see some more of these ping up. But you can see this timeline right here. This is when I came to the site a few minutes ago. All right, so we have our pixels deployed for GA4, for Meta, and for Google Tag Manager. The next steps are going to happen entirely in Google Tag Manager. And so we click into here and we're greeted with this overview. Within Google Tag Manager, it's structured into concepts around tags, which are the specific scripts that we're going to deploy, or the specific things that we want to put on the site. Triggers, which are just, we're tracking actions that should trigger the tag to be deployed. And then variables are pieces of data that we can collect that can be added to tags. Folders and templates are pretty much irrelevant for this conversation and used a lot less. Folders are just a way to organize things, and templates, are very specific use cases that you probably, I personally have like almost never used templates at all, even using Google Tag Manager very extensively. So if we click into tags, you're going to see the screen. So I have a bunch more here. By default, you're going to have nothing in this screen. But if I come in here and, for example, click on GA4 configuration. When we talked in the beginning about wanting to set up GA4 or Meta directly within Google Tag Manager, this is how we do it. And in fact, I'm actually going to pause a couple of these events because I have deployed through this demo, deployed them on site. You don't want them firing from both, because if you do from both, you're going to have duplicate events coming through. So you either want to set up your Google Analytics tracking setup tag in beehiiv, or you want to do it in Google Tag Manager. You don't want to do it in both. So I'm going to pause these. Invalid input. Why is this invalid? Let's refresh. I'm going to pause this, and I'm going to pause this page view. There we go. So these are paused. And so real quick, before we get into the actual event tracking step, we'll do a little sidebar. And if you do want to deploy your stuff through here, it's pretty straightforward in that I think I should switch to this. I think I'm getting a weird interface because I don't see a thing to create my script, my tags. There we go. So this is what you'll see. I can go here and click new. I'm going to, in the tag configuration, if I wanted to deploy GA4 directly through Google Tag Manager, would come into here and I would click Google for tag. Now this tag ID is going to be where we put in that same G code that we put into the beehiiv account. So I come over here to beehiiv, I grab this, and I will put it into this right here. I actually already have that set up here. So we have this Google tag. What I've done here looks slightly different. It's not, you don't need to do anything different. It's just like you just put the code here. This uses a variable because I use the GA4 ID in multiple places. If you do want to set it up as a variable, you would just come in here and click the plus button for here, variable configuration, and this is going to be a constant, and then you would just put the code there and then save it as your GA4 ID. Once you do that, you can now use this variable rather than actually having to continuously copy and paste the code. It's a little bit of a shortcut. The other thing you want to do here is, if you're setting it up through Google Tag Manager, is send _page_view and set that to true so that we know when this page loads, it's going to send a page view event. That's pretty straightforward. That's what we're doing just for Google Analytics. And then for the triggering, there's a couple built-in things. You're going to have, if you hit this plus button, these are the different triggers. What we want to do is have a page view trigger that's just going to be all page views. Oh, it's already here. So I have to, come on. We'll just remove it and we'll re-add it. So all pages. Oops. Let me get you the view of what this looks like. Okay. So that's just, I think if you just click it, it'll just be all page views. And then our technology on sites use what's called React. It's a coding language where it loads very quickly because there's not a traditional page load after every click. So if someone goes from your homepage to an article, on a traditional website, you'd have an actual whole page reload process, which would trigger another one of these page view events. With our sites, it's called what's called a history change because of the technology we use. It makes it very, very fast. It doesn't change anything negatively. The only thing is that in order to trigger a page view event for those history changes, we have to set that. And so to do, we would come in here and literally just under new, set up a history change event, all history changes, and you just call it history change or page view history change, whatever you want to do. And that's going to show up like that. And so for this configuration tag, you would set those both. Now, if that sounds a little bit complicated, we've done a lot of the work once, and now we don't have to do the triggering steps again. That's going to be flexible for now for those next steps. As we talked about, we want to also do meta. So meta is going to be very similar. We're going to come in here, and in fact, in this case, we use what's called a community tag. So if we come into this view for tag configuration, we're going to click Discover New Tag Types in the Community Gallery. What we're going to do here is once this pops up, we're going to search for Facebook. So these are vetted, verified tags that developers have created. And so we're going to go down and click on the Facebook pixel tag to import. So if you type in Facebook, it'll create the shortlist and you're going to grab that Facebook pixel one. So once we have that, under tag configuration, we can come in and we can select Facebook pixel as the tag we want to add. Very similar to what we just did with Google Analytics 4. You can hard code the pixel ID in right here, or similar, we can create a same constant type variable and you can put the ID in that, and then you can just use pixel ID. And that becomes useful as we set up subsequent events. You don't have to remember what that code is. You don't have to continue copy and pasting. To set up the basic page view event, we're going to come down, once we have that set up, we're going to come into where it says standard. These are the list of the standard events that come built with Facebook out of the box. We're going to check page view. And then under triggering, we're going to do the same exact thing we did with Google Analytics, and we're going to hit history change and all pages. So once that's set up, we're good to go. If I go to the one that I had initially set up right here, you can see that that's exactly how it's set up. So metapixel, page view, and the triggering down here. So yeah, very confusing, but if you follow the step-by-step, it doesn't necessarily require more deeper insight into like why we're doing it at this point. You can dive into that and if this seems more confusing than you're comfortable with, you don't have to follow any of those like recent steps. If you're watching the recording, we'll probably have separated that out. But that is if you want to keep everything in Google Tag Manager. If you don't, then forget everything I just said. You have your Facebook pixel, you have your GA4 pixel deployed through beehiiv. And so now we're going to set up these tracking events. So the first step to setting up the tracking events, so when somebody subscribes to your newsletter, you're going to go into this trigger section, and we're going to create a new trigger for an event. We're going to go down here. So under trigger configuration, scroll down to custom event, and we're going to type in signed up. So what this is saying, a little bit, bear with me, that we're going to give you a little bit of the instruction behind this. When somebody subscribes to your newsletter on beehiiv, we actually fire a piece of code from the website called a data layer event, which is what is meant by this custom event tag right here. So when we fire that event, we are letting whatever tracking tools are on the site know that a subscription occurred. And so the event that we call it signed up, which is why it has to be exactly like this, no lowercase. It has to literally be signed lowercase and then capital U. So what this is going to do is going to tell Google Tag Manager that when this signed up event is detected, that means we now want to do something. And that something is to track the actual subscription with these other tools that we're configuring with. So you can see here, I've done exactly that. Event name signed up, and then a type custom event, and I just call it signed up. Within the tags, we're going to now jump back to this tags view, and you're going to go and create a new tag. We're going to select the trigger to be signed up. And then this is going to be the GA4 configuration for Google Analytics. You're going to click on the Google Analytics type, and we're going to do GA4 event. So now here, it's going to ask for that measurement ID again. This is why we created it as a variable, or you can just copy and paste it if you have it on your clipboard. But we're going to drop that GA4, and we're getting this little check mark. And now we're going to set an event name. So you could, in theory, call this whatever you want it to be. There are a couple built-in names for events that Google is going to automatically recognize, and that helps automatically format some of the reports. One of those events is called signup, sign_up. And so for Google Analytics, we're going to use this event name called signup so that it configures automatically with some of the reports that are built into Google Analytics. So you have the measurement ID, you have the event name, and you have the trigger set up. And this is all that's included. So you go here, you call it GA4 signed up or GA4 subscription, whatever you want to call it. The names for these tags don't matter. They just you want to be able to recognize them and so that you know what they are. And so once this is deployed, we have this information here. When we go into Google Analytics and we go to our reports and we look at our user acquisition, for example, give Google a second to catch up. I will now be able to go into the key events section or this event section, and we can select sign up as one of the events that was triggered. So from this view now, I can see that I had from organic social, one sign up. From the referral channel, one sign up. If I wanted to see the specific UTM parameters, so the specific, not the category, but the specific source and medium, I can change that. And so I can see that specifically one of these signups came from this Instagram, referred from Instagram, and then this one came from somebody, is probably one of my test ones, from being referred to my site from the beehiiv interface. You can see here that I've also had some visits from Bing, Google, Facebook, and so forth. But in terms of tracking these signups, we now are seeing signups basically trickle in. So this can now really be very much a home base for how you're viewing your web growth. And so if you're publishing on LinkedIn and you want to see how many people came and visited my beehiiv publication from LinkedIn, you could come to this user acquisition report and you could see which ones came from LinkedIn. Now you're going to want to tag that traffic with the UTM parameters, which we shared data around before, but you'll be able to see that in here and see how many of those people came and visited and how many signed up. So for example, Google Analytics, I had 5 visitors, none of them signed up. I had 4 visitors come from Instagram, one of them signed up, 25% conversion rate. The next one that we're going to walk through is going to be the one for Meta, which is very, very similar. We've already added the template for the Meta event. So what we're going to do is come in here, because we've already added that template from the previous steps. Remember, we went to the community gallery, we found Facebook, and we added the Facebook pixel. We're going to click on that. We're going to add in our Meta pixel ID, either using the variable or we're going to copy and paste it. And then for this one, we're going to go down and we're going to select subscribe. And then we're going to come down and we're going to select our signed up trigger. And once we do that, that's all. We're good to go. That sign up is, once we hit save, we're going to be good to go. The thing with Google Tag Manager is once these events are created, we're going to go to, they're ready to go. You just have to publish them. There's like a version control. So once you've made these changes, you're going to hit submit. You add a descriptive name for the version, like added event tracking, and then hit publish. Once you hit publish, that's when those scripts are going to be deployed on your website itself. So to recap, what we've done is showed you 2 different ways for you to go into either Google Tag Manager or your beehiiv site and add the tracking scripts for GA4 and Meta. Then we came into then we came into Google Tag Manager. We showed you how to set up the tracking in Google Tag Manager if you want. But then we specifically showed you how to set up the tracking for the signup events for both GA4 and Meta. Now, what we haven't covered is that advanced tracking part, which, again, if you just bear with me and you follow step by step, you won't go wrong. So in that way, if it feels very complicated, I'd recommend just trusting the process. But if you are interested in kind of that next level of like much more accurate tracking, we're going to do one extra thing. So within that data layer event for signed up, we also pass through additional data. And this is why the data layer event tracking is superior to something like a thank you page tracking or a click-based tracking. So within that signed up event, we actually are able to add additional data. So we add things like their subscriber ID, we add their email address, and we add a couple other things. In this case, we're going to access the email address so that we can pass that back to Meta and we can pass that back to Google if we want. So in order to set up this variable to capture that email so we can pass it back, we're going to go to variables, and under user defined variables, we're going to click new. Variable configuration, we're going to click data layer variable. And then under variable name, we're going to type in event underscore totally lowercase, and then capital P props. So event props, short for event properties, but event props dot email. And that basically is going to say when there's a data layer event and it has the attribute event props dot email, we're going to grab that value and we're going to save it in the browser's short-term memory, just restricted to that single page view. So I've done that already, and I've named it DLV, short for data layer variable email. So you can see here, data layer variable type, event props dot email. Doesn't matter, just keep that the same, and then you're good to go. So the way that we add this to these different signup events is we'll start with Facebook. If we go to Facebook, that subscribe event we just created, we're going to edit it. I'm going to go down here and click this button. By default, it's going to be unchecked. I'm going to check enable advanced matching. And you'll see this new field for customer information data parameters. I'm going to unfurl that, and I'm going to be able to select a bunch of different variable names. So I'm just going to select email from that list. And then under here, we're going to either select from this list. You can also type in the curly braces, DLV email, which means that when this event fires for subscribe, so when we fire the signed up event, it's going to fire the tag that we already set up for sign up for subscribe. And it's also going to pull in that user's email. It's going to hash it. So Facebook doesn't get to see the email itself. It's privacy and secure. But it will be able to then be matched on their side to say, okay, this user who signed up with email A, we know that email A clicked on an ad. And then at some point in the future, even though we couldn't see it because they had an ad blocker, this person on beehiiv is telling me that somebody with the email A completed the conversion event. And so we're able to match those and basically say that the ad worked. So yeah, so once that's set up there, we'd save that. You have advanced matching set up now for Facebook. GA4, let's see, yep. It's going to be very similar. We're going to use what's called this user provided data variables. Within this event, once we set up the signup event, there's this check mark where you can say include user provided data from your website. You're going to check that. By default, you won't have this user provided data thing, but you're going to say select first party data variable, new variable. And then from here, what you can do is come into this manual configuration, select email. You're going to select that same data layer variable. We're not going to have any of the other data. And once you hit save, it'll save as whatever the name of that variable is. I've already done that with this user provided data variable. I can click and show you the configuration. So manual configuration, that's exactly what I just described. So that when this event occurs, we're sending that data back to Meta. Now, this is useful because within things like Google Ads, if we go into a Google Ads account, you can, in the settings, import conversions from Google Analytics 4. So you don't actually have to set up separate tracking for Google Ads. You can actually pull in conversions from Google Analytics 4. And when you do that, that email can be helpful because then Google Ads can use that to match in a very similar way as Facebook. Sorry, Tony's question is there a place where you can find all of those attributes listed out in their description? I'm not sure. I can work on providing that though. So I can show you guys in real time what some of this looks like. And so if I have a tool here that allows me to see what's happening under the hood. So let's go back to the home page and we can see this happen in real time. So I need to actually publish the changes I just made because you can see here, this is super fascinating. You can see on this part of my screen right here, I have not yet published the changes that I've just made, but I did add the Facebook Pixel ID, and you can see it's firing twice because it's still deploying all of my stuff from Google Analytics 4, but because I added the Pixel directly to beehiiv, it's deploying both. And so I'm getting an error here saying, hey, dude, you're firing this Pixel twice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back here. We're going to submit the changes. The only changes I've made here, this is not what your screen will look like. I've just paused these two. So I'm going to continue to publish those. Paused, hard-coded pixels. And this tool is called AdSwerve. I can drop a link to that in the follow-up. It's not that important. This is kind of super technical. It just is good for illustrative purposes. So I published that change. And you can now see I'm no longer getting that error screaming at me that I have two pixels firing at the same time. All right, so now this is what my page looks like. If I do this, I'm gonna do EJ plus tracking demo at beehiiv.com. I'm gonna hit subscribe. It's saying, trying to check whether I'm a bot or not. Some of the spam protection that we have on site because I'm using this based in the developer tools. It's saying that, oh, is this person actually like a real person? Give it a sec. Come on now. My internet is particularly slow when I'm doing the streaming on the video share as well. There we go. Let's just refresh. All right. This is the hard part of my job when I'm trying to overcome the security measures that we put in place. Not to necessarily make sure that I can't do what I'm doing, but it just goes to show like there is more that goes on under the hood when on these sites to prevent spam. And sometimes this can be a little bit challenging because this is not the way that most users would actually use the site. I'm using the plus in my email address. I am accessing the site with the developer tools open. That is not the typical way that somebody is viewing a site if they're a real person. I'm hoping that this still works. It's been a little bit since I went through this exact process. I can also do it one other way that might work. Okay, cool. So let's undo that. We'll refresh. Now I've probably tripped the hackles of this tool because I've submitted a bunch. Let's try one more time. Let's see. All right, let's try without the plus. I think that might be what the issue is, which is great to see because you don't want people adding fake emails. I have to do this in an incognito window. Promise I'm not a bot. Okay, cool. There we go. Okay, so now if I go back to that window, I should be able to see what happened. Yep. So now, in terms of these events, let's see. You should see. Is the page load? That's weird. Give me 1 second, folks. Give me 1 second. I think that I'm going to just do this in a separate window. Let's do blog.beehiiv.com. This is going to be the same thing. I don't like using this actual email because I'm already subscribed to a bunch of emails. And so we have some protection so that if you're already subscribed, it doesn't double count. It's one of those ways in which this is not an error. It's just one of the ways in which we prevent people from inflating numbers and subscribing like in incorrect ways, which is why I use like that fake email. That's one that I haven't subscribed with before. Let's see. This used to be really easy before our security got much tighter. All right. It's like, you're super sketchy, bro. You keep subscribing on different sites. There we go. All right. There we go. Okay, cool. I found it here. So if you see here, we have this signed up event. So this is what it looks like in this tracking tool. So data layer event, I told you this was a data layer event for the event signed up. You can see that right here. And then this is going to look slightly different than what you guys have on your side because this is a house account. So we have a little bit of additional tracking that I've set up to do. But essentially, this signed up event is now going to mean that when we have it named a little bit differently, so we're able to track it a little bit more granularly, but you'll see in this feed, you'll see some of these events come through. So for Facebook, this is like our custom event for submitted email to the blog. That would look like signed up or subscribe through your interface. But just goes to show right here, you can see in real time that this data layer event for the subscription came through. And the whole point of me doing this, I remember now, is to show you what the structure of that call looks like. So when somebody signs up, the data layer event that we fire is, I'm going to drop this in the chat, looks like this. So if you look in the chat, it came out super ugly, so I'll just blow up on my screen down here what that looks like. You can see here we have the event called signed up, and then these are the event props. So event props, and then we captured that email figure, so that was event props.email. These are the other things that we deploy. So category, conversion, action, signed up. Label is the page that the sign up occurred on, so you could track that if you want. Google Analytics is going to do that already. Facebook's going to do that already. But if there's some purpose that you have for another tracking tool, the value, we just set it to a token value of 0, timestamp of when it occurred, the subscriber ID. So this is going to be how you can view the subscriber. This is like the ID that gets assigned within beehiiv. Publication ID is the publication ID of your newsletter. And the publication name, in this case, is beehiiv blog, but would be filled with your name. These are the different pieces of data that we pass through. As you saw in that real-time example, we have a bunch of very, very sophisticated spam prevention, bad actor prevention tools on there that I ended up having to just subscribe with a real email that I haven't used before with the blog specifically in order to actually get this to come through, which is really good because you don't want a user just coming in and submitting like 5 different emails, spamming your site. You don't want people necessarily entering fake emails. We do scrubbing of like any fake email. We make sure that the inbox is deliverable. We make sure that it's a real email. And so you can see as soon as I entered a real email, it worked right away. But yeah, this is additional data. If you are more tracking minded, if you're a marketer, you can come in here and see that information. Tony, I was not looking at the chat while I was going through that process. Any questions that popped up while I was heads down figuring that out? Got it. So yeah, when they log in, so we have instructions on setting up the Sparkloop widget. Let me access that part of the site. So we go in here. Oh, because it's the Sparkloop specific one. Yeah. So what you would do is the process there would be very, very similar. We don't officially support Sparkloop, they're a competitor. So we don't have documentation around how to use Sparkloop. We have our own competitor to Sparkloop that has better verification and more safeguards for users. The way you would do that, though, somewhat unofficially, is that very similar to how we triggered this sign up event to fire to GA4, you would use their script that they provide, and then you would trigger it based on that sign up event so that when that data layer event is fired, it's going to tell Sparkloop, hey, it's time to show the widget on the site. I'm not more familiar. I've never set up their widget before. So that's basically as much as I know, but that would be generally the process for doing that. And so in that way, you'd be ensuring that you're not doing it when the users sign up. So I know this was like super between the ears, like super technical. The punchline is that if you follow these instructions, you can set up your ads tracking for GA4 and Meta, and it'll work. You'll be able to see an accurate view of the people who are subscribing. If you were to want to do something like Reddit or TikTok, there's a bunch of ways. You would basically follow the exact same instructions. The difference would be you would come in here to that community gallery, and instead of looking for Facebook, you might look for TikTok, and you're going to find one of these. So it would be the TikTok pixel would be the base pixel, and then TikTok would be for the events. For X, if you wanted to do X, I don't know if it's still Twitter. Yeah, it's still going to be listed as Twitter here, but the base pixel for just tracking page views is going to be this one. And then if you want to set up the event tracking itself for subscription, you would use this. But the instructions around adding your pixel ID and the conversion IDs and whatnot is going to be very, very similar. You're going to set it up based on their instructions, and you're going to trigger it either for the base pixel on all of those page views and history changes. And you're going to trigger the conversion event on all of those signed up conversions. Reddit was another one that came up. Same thing. If we go through, I'll just do this real quick. So add it to workspace. From here, you're going to get your pixel ID from Reddit. And then you have the event that you want to fire. You could do sign up, you could do lead, whatever. And then you would just trigger it based on sign up. And in this case, this is very similar to the Facebook one. So if you also want to track page visits, you would just do that and then choose the all pages or and the history change here. Similarly, you can enable advanced matching. You can do email. You can set up advanced matching through Reddit. The principles are all the same. The screens are all very similar. The process remains the same. With that, I know we're up on an hour. That flew by. I know that's pretty complicated. The punchline with all of this being, you set this up, you get unparalleled access and visibility into how users are interacting with your newsletter outside of beehiiv. You can integrate all of these different ad products that can get your operations around ads just like humming. And that's really going to be critical to getting that super low cost per sign up. I don't know anybody in the newsletter space who can get an efficient cost per sign up with ads without going through a process like this, which is why, all things considered, we make it pretty straightforward. Yes, it may not be perfectly straightforward if you don't know about these tools, but in terms of just being able to follow the instructions and just move from screen to screen, we make it as easy as possible. And we are, as far as I know, the only platform that does this type of verified deployment of integrating with these ad platforms in such a way. With that being said, I'd be happy to answer any questions and stay on a little bit longer. If this was useful, I do like while people are writing their questions, we always like to plug the community. So we do a lot of these virtual events. We generally do once a week, or we do multiple a week. We do one of these growth-focused ones on Tuesdays. We many times do a partner one on Thursdays. We do a what we call Jumpstart on Fridays, where we have a session for brand new users that walks them through getting set up on the platform. If these are useful, I also recommend joining the Hive. The Hive is our paid community through Slack. It's not an extra fee. If you are a paying beehiiv user, you get access to the Hive for free. And so with that being said, it's like more than 3,100 active publishers. These are people who are investing in their newsletters, paying for beehiiv, actively publishing. There's dozens, if not hundreds of messages a day going back and forth. Things like how to give me feedback on my newsletter, who wants to do a cross promotion, how can I monetize. There's, I think, literally like 12 or 15 different channels that are very, very active, all to build that community, make the newsletter world feel a little bit smaller. It's one of kind of the most talent dense, kind of information dense places you can really work in. So if you are a paying beehiiv user and you're not part of the Hive, I highly recommend digging out the invite that we sent. If you need another one, you can email me at ej@beehiiv.com. If you are interested in becoming a beehiiv customer, that's one of the biggest benefits, I would say. When you sign up and when you make that purchase, we send you a link to join. If you are a paid user and you didn't get the invite, we do use the email that's on your beehiiv account. So if you have a different Slack email than your beehiiv account email, we can also fix that. You just have to reach out to us. Again, that's ej@beehiiv.com. Happy to forward you to our community manager who can get that worked out. Yes, I will share it in the chat. It's right there. Happy to help out folks that way. I hope this was helpful. I know this, again, was a little bit information dense. We don't have a ton of questions. Either I lost a bunch of people or it was helpful and properly explained. We do have a survey that goes out after these sessions. This is a little bit different. This was a bit more technical than the ones we typically run. And we did it because we get so much feedback asking, how do we do these sorts of things after some of the other sessions? People are like, great, I'm bought in. I want to grow with meta ads or whatever, but I'm not actually sure how to set up the tracking. So this was really born from the feedback that we've gotten from previous webinars. And so I hope it was valuable. But please provide that feedback. Be brutally honest. You can't hurt my feelings. It only helps make us better and makes these sessions more useful. Thank you so much for Tony for fielding the questions and being such a great producer. Everybody give him a little round of applause and some appreciation. Otherwise, seeing no more questions in the chat, move on. But if you have questions after watching the video, we do have comments turned on the blog, so you can drop those comments. We will get tagged in them and we'll be able to respond to them. So always happy to engage and get your questions answered. Thank you so much for your time. Without the 25 of you or so who joined today, this wouldn't be possible. So I give you so much appreciation, all of my appreciation. If you're watching the recording, this means you. If you're watching either the live view, I am appreciative of you. Each and every one of you are why we do this, and you're the best. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Have a great week, and have a great holidays.